permission to record. All right, let's get started. So today we're going to talk about, using variables inside a storyline. And that's a topic that's just not talked about well enough. So I feel like this may be a start to other topics regarding using variables.
Mm-hmm.
Now, personally, I started using variables in my very first storyline project, which, was kind of strange at the time because, you're just learning a new program and you're pretty much going for the most difficult part of the program. But I thought it was interesting. Coming from, I used to use ActionScript, which, if you're familiar with ActionScript, that's Flash. So it's a program as well. It's coding, but in a way it's also logical, right? So it's not the way you think about coding in the traditional sense. It's more, what's the logic? How does 1+1 equal 2? That's the way I was thinking about it at the time. So just discovering you could do that inside a storyline. I created this. This is my very first project, the storyline, if you can believe it. So I'll take you back down memory lane. At least for me, it's been about 8 years. So yeah. So yeah, it was called Fish Pong. It's a fun project where it's very simple, and it's actually what got me interested in the e-learning challenges. So just watch it from the sidelines for years, and then eventually submitted my very first project and getting featured, based upon that project. I thought it was encouraging for me, at least, to been participating in the e-learning challenges for 5 years or more. Not even sure anymore. But in any case, now the way this project works is it's made up of 2 slides. The very first slide is just an introduction. Here's some instructions for how to complete the project. And maybe I should just do a quick preview to get us familiar with the project. So it's just about this little guy. He's a hero. And obviously he's trying to escape, right? But here's a way to get more instructions. So, and this, I just used state change for this one. Oh no, sorry, show layer, which obviously state change would have been better, but it's the end of the day and the crocs are hungry. Click rapidly to survive. So it's very brief instructions, but that also speaks to how quickly you have to be to survive in this game. So let's go ahead and explore it. So you get that little arrow that's telling you here's what to click on, right? But you never quite know what to do when you click because you're not quick enough, and the little guy gets eaten, right? Which it's game over. You have to restart. So now let's see how quickly we can click. Whoops.
Oh.
Exactly. You're supposed to click rapidly, right? Now, if I'm trying to think of a real life game you can compare this with, I think there was this, is it a fiddler or this spinning wheel that you could buy at the stores a couple of years ago? I forget what it was. It kept you from sleeping, right? So that's exactly what this game is, right? So if you're at work and you're feeling sleepy, right, it's just a way for you to stay awake, because you snooze or you lose, right?
Right.
So you're just clicking this little guy for hours and
Yeah.
hours
Well,
until
that,
you,
oh,
right.
that's clever.
Yeah. So how was this built? This was built using variables. And so let's look under the hood and see exactly how this was built. So I have layers for each crocodile. So it might be alligators, but and what's really happening is I have a motion path for each. And sorry, this is an advanced class, so hopefully everyone's at least a little bit familiar with Storyline to know what motion paths are, or and if you don't, I can go over that quickly. So pretty much this is a JPEG image which was brought in from, which I found on Fitbit or similar, and remove the background, so it's a PNG file, right?
Right.
Yeah. And what I did was set motion paths going in 4 different directions. So up, down, left, and right. So if you click on the, you don't see it now because you're not on the animations tab. When you click on animation, when you click on animations, you see the motion paths. And we can recreate this quickly, right? So let's just make a new slide. Yeah, I feel like this would be a good place to start with variables. Also, because it's my first project, so I'm a bit of sentiment going on there. But so let me delete all of these motion paths. And what I did was just copy that fish. I'm on a new slide now, and deleted all of the motion paths. So we're pretty much, and maybe even just delete all of the, because it copies all of your actions and triggers every time you copy an object. So you may want to delete that just so we have fresh stuff. And when you click on the little guy, you go back to animations and click on motion path. And that's automatically the default will be a downward path. So that looks just about right. So, that's where the intersection happens. So that object intersects with the alligator, and so you don't have, you can adjust the length if you want. You can just, maybe hold down shift to control it or not, depending on where you want the little guy to end up, right? So this green is telling you that's the point of origination, and the red is telling you that's the end point. So you want to add more motion paths to this guy, right? So you add a second motion path. You don't see it because they're in the same spot. You just have to, without holding shift, just kind of guesstimate where that will end up, and just do the same thing over and over again.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions. I'm just going to go ahead. Set this up.
This would be great to show people how to tell time on an analog clock.
Right, exactly. So every time you add a motion path, you get this trigger that's just added for each one. So, that's motion path 1, motion path 2, 3, and 4. It's hard to tell which one. So you kind of have to remember how I kind of went anti-clockwise from the bottom. So that kind of makes sense. You can always select each one to find out in any case. So what do you think will happen when I click preview? Can anyone guess?
Nothing.
Nothing? I don't even know the answer myself. So let's try it out. Because it's supposed to go in 4 different directions, right? And they're all set up to move the picture when the timeline starts. So just get confused or okay, so it does the first one. Can anyone guess why it was the first one?
That was the default, or that was the first one, right?
Yes, that's true. What's also true? Go ahead. Sorry.
I want to say the triggers are in order.
The triggers are
in order.
In order, exactly. So if you look here on the trigger panel, the first trigger is so if we were to move this down to the bottom, then 2 will be the first one. So you also have to pay attention to the order of your triggers on the trigger panel. Sorry, go ahead.
I said that makes sense.
Yes. Well, that didn't make sense. What just happened? Because we've moved this to the bottom, and I'm not sure why. It's still, yeah. Yeah, that shouldn't happen.
I always thought that, so this is illuminating to me, and I'm gonna tell you why. Because
Right.
when you're on the base, when you're doing the base line, right? And then you build up. And this, if this is logical, then it's going down.
Right. Exactly.
So if that's unexpected, that's good.
Right. Yeah. Every time something like this happens, I say, "Oh, it's not storyline, it's me." I always take blame. So,
Could it have something to do with the fact that all of them says when the timeline starts? I mean, it can't move in all 4 directions at the same time.
Right.
So maybe it just chooses one.
Okay. Yeah. Let's go with that. Let's go with that explanation.
Oh, sorry.
But in any case, so you have your motion path set up going in 4 different directions, which in this case it doesn't matter what order it is. So what you're going to do next is set up a variable. Sorry, not even a variable now. So what I did next in this case was so every time the object, the fish, intersects with the croc, something happens, right? Whether it gets eaten but what's controlling what direction it goes to is what we're trying to find out. So just to refresh our memories, nothing happens until you click start, but once you do, it starts to go in different directions, and you can't predict what direction it's going to. So that's when you need variables, right? You need the variable and in this case, I use a random variable that's going in a different direction. Because if it was going in different orders, the learner or the user would kind of predict it and start to follow that pattern. And, but what we want to do is make it go in a random direction each time. So that's when you need variables. And, the symbol X represents variables in a lot of industries. It's really just, I'm not even sure why we use X. Is it find X or? Yeah, I guess that's why. So you're
algebra.
right. It's algebra, right? And so we already have, the variables set up for this project, but let's assume we want to create a new variable. So this is your variables panel, right? Now in your variables panel, there are built-in variables where Storyline has, well, I was going to say hundreds until I scrolled to the bottom. So yeah, not hundreds, but a few variables that are automatically a setup inside of your project. So you have things like menu, slide number, total slides. Those are all inbuilt variables, and you get to use those from time to time, like the caption variables, you know, saying progress, and all of that. You don't need to worry about that just yet, but if you come across it, this is where you can adjust it if needed. But here you're trying to build a custom variable for your project, right? So I think search variables just, searches whatever built-in variables you have over here, so you don't have to worry about that as well. What we're really concerned about here is creating a new variable, which you can do by hitting on that plus button. That brings up this pop-up, which you can name. So since we already have a random number variable out there, we can say random number 2 or RN2, depending on what you want to call it. So let's say random number 2, and who can guess what we're trying to, or sorry, let me just talk about it. So there are 3 types of variables that you can add inside of your project. You can add a true or false variable, you can add text display variable, and you can add number variables. So just so we don't, get stuck on the numbers, let's call this fish. Let's just call that fish variable, right? So it could be a true or false, it could be a number, it could be text. Now, true or false variables are used when you're trying to tell an object to do something when, this other than is true, when this value is true. So you only have 2 options for the true or false variables. So you can either be true or false. So not a lot of flexibility there. But for text, you can use that to display a learner's name, so you can use it throughout the course. So let's say you ask them to input their names at the beginning. They can input the names, and that sets that variable to that name. So you can reference the variable later on throughout the course, and make it more personalized that way. And I'll go over how to do that in a second. But for now, we're trying to set up a number variable. So we're trying to choose between number 1 to 4, which represent different motion paths that we've set up earlier. And so what we want to do is set up, you can choose between random and value. So, obviously in this case, we're trying to set up a random variable between the number 1 and 4. That's all this is, right? I mean, you don't think of storyline as coding, but in a way it is, because you're setting rules for it. This is just setting up those rules. Like, you want every time maybe the timeline starts, you want this variable fish to, let's just call this fish variable so we know exactly what it is. You want the fish variable to pick a random number between 1 and 4. So it's not gonna, choose 5. 5 isn't an option here. You've set up that code, that rule, that, this is what you should follow. And then you hit OK. Is everyone clear on this process?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay. So you hit OK, and instantly you see that's telling you, and this is showing you the use count. So you haven't referenced this variable at all, so it's going to be 0. And then you hit OK. So what we're trying to do here is tell this fish where to move when certain things happen, right? So here we don't want it to move when the timeline starts. We want it to move when the variable, let me just bring that up. So just double click this, and that brings it up. And you can say move. You can say move picture 1, which is a fish, along line motion path 2 when, so let's just use this 2 as an anchor for this, right? So when the variable changes, so you look for variable changes, and then you have to state which variable. So this is assuming you have multiple variables, which you actually do in this case, right? So you want to use the fish variable, right? So move the fish along motion path 2 when the fish, when the variable changes, fish variable changes, and you, this is kind of annoying, but you have to, choose fish variable all over again, which, here's a condition, right? But it's not annoying, actually. This is this is what you should do, because if this wasn't there, there's no way to tell the fish what to do, right? So you're saying if fish variable equals value 2, right? We're using that 2 for motion path 2. So, that way it's kind of a line, right? So we don't need an else statement in this case, because else is just saying, if this isn't true, then, what else is true? Like, you want it to stay in place, but it's already going to stay in place. So if this doesn't happen, it's going to either stay in place or go somewhere else. So you hit OK, and that automatically, this isn't like the others. This is now using variables. So, even if you were to start the timeline, it wouldn't, it's not moving when the timeline starts, it's moving when the variable changes. So this option to move in the second motion path direction isn't there any longer for this fish, which is a good thing, right? So you want to do that for every other path. So let's, I'm just going to do this quickly because we kind of went over it. So for Trey, it's going to be when the variable changes as well. Fish variable, condition, fish variable, value, Trey, right? You're going to do that for path 4, where variable changes, fish variable, value, form. Okay. This is for, variable changes, fish variable. Now, just, there are conditions where you can use the object instead. So, but we can talk about that in another class. For this, let's just make this, let's try to understand this concept first. So, you click on fish variable, and you use 1 as well, just so it aligns with that 1, and then hit OK. Now you have all of this set up to move in different directions. What do you think will happen when we hit preview now?
It should when it, you hit like whatever it is, 4 pixels or something, right? That it would go in that direction to your red dot.
Say that again, please.
Oh, no.
Yeah. So if we were to play this now, so now it's, it's saying if fish variable equals value tree, but as the fish variable is still value 0, right? So that the default value is, the default value is between 1 and 4. The default value is between 1 and 4. So tell you what, let's preview it and see what happens. So nothing happens, right? That's only because we haven't told it to set the variable to a value, right? It's still, even though it says the default value is between 1 and 4, the default value is really 0 at this point because we haven't activated that variable, right? So the way to activate that variable is to create a new trigger that says, change, adjust variable. This is going to be a friend if you're going to work with variables. Just remember to adjust your variable. That's telling your variable to change, to morph into something else. So you can either set that variable. So you look for that fish variable to value. So if you set it to, say, value 2, right? Even though it's a random number, you can set it to 2 when the timeline starts on this slide. And that's only going to make it move to motion pad 2, which that's not what we want. We want to, we want to add, sorry, let me think about this for a second. We want to set the variable to a random number, right? So, we want to set that fish variable to a random number between 1 and 4, which is what we already kind of did with that while setting up the variable, but you have to repeat it here so it knows exactly what you're doing. So, set, and you see, each time you kind of figure things out what you want, it opens up more options. Like we didn't have this option before, it was just, value, right? But once you click on random, which is what you want, you want the variable to be adjusted when the timeline starts, but you're setting it, that variable, to a random number between 1 and 4 when the timeline starts on the slide, right? So let's hit OK. And if you want to see that displayed, what you need to do is go to Insert and click on Text Box. So we're trying to find a way to display this. I'm not sure why the text box is not working. So the way to display it is to use the percentage sign that calls that variable, right? So fish variable, we call it. And then you close it with the percentage sign. That's telling this text box to display that variable, whatever name it is. So when you click OK, don't worry about what it shows. It's just a way to display so you can see what you're doing. And you don't need to, you can drag this to the side if you want, but it helps you while you're building to see what's actually showing, right? So it says 4. So it sets that random number to 4, and that's the direction that fish went to. If we were to replay this, it's setting a random number each time. Is this clear to everyone?
Yeah. I'm gonna have to watch the video again, but
Yes.
Yeah,
Totally fine.
variables are tricky.
Yeah,
So-
they're kind of tricky. And I feel like we're maybe starting with a more advanced one where maybe let's dive into something simpler because the use cases for this, I mean, you're not going to build this for any corporate client. So this is more of a fun project. Let's go on to something simpler, something you can immediately use. This one is one that I also built for the e-learning challenges, but at least you got some.
oh yeah.
You got a good overview of what variables can do, at least. Not this one. Any Harry Potter fans in the house?
Yes.
Awesome. What house do you belong?
I'm not deep into it. I've watched
Okay.
the movies and I really enjoy them. I just like that,
Awesome.
you know, fantasy type.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah, so this was one that I built. It's called Hogwarts University. It's really just, it's an onboarding. So let me just play it. So it's an onboarding for a new wizard or witch. So let's assume there was a school for wizardry. I'm sure there are schools for wizardry, but and you're a new student, this is what your onboarding document could look like. It's taking its time to load. Right. If you have any questions, now is a good time to ask.
I do have a question.
Yes, please.
How would you know, or what instances would someone typically use variables outside of maybe what you just showed us,
Yeah.
wanting to move something?
Right. Yeah, so this one is actually, can you hear the sound coming out from this?
No.
No, okay, perfect. That's better. So this is actually a use case. So if you were to say, you know, have you seen those courses where you have to enter your name before you proceed? It personalizes the experience, right? So let's say my name is Samuel. My wizard name is, I don't have a wizard name, but if I did,
Waiting.
what? Yeah, I just say Sam the Wiz or something. Age, let's say 99. And I clicked on next. You know, now it seems like it knows my name, right?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way for Storyline to know my name, except I just told it. So think about magic, right? Like it's an illusion.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Exactly. But it makes me feel like, oh, they know my name. They must want me here, right? You know, it can say, congratulations, Samuel, for completing this course. You know, that's just, and this is used throughout the course where, you know, I could try the sorting hour hat that automatically tells me I'm a Hufflepuff, which I can find out more about what Hufflepuffs are. I can click that to go back and stuff like that. But so here's how I built this. Let's go to that name slide. And I really should have started with this, so apologies. So here's the name. Here's a name function. And the way to build this is to, you know, this is a text box, pretty much. And here it's saying set first name, which is a variable equal to the type value, which the learner will type when the text entry loses focus. So this is the text entry box. That's all it is. Which you can say insert and you can go to, so it's not a regular text box, right? So you wouldn't choose text box in this case. You would choose an inputs data entry box. Is everyone clear on that?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
All right. So you click on the data entry box and you kind of, you know, drag that out and it automatically adds this value in there, which is, you know, type your text here. It's just instructions for the learner on what to do, which you can change that. You can format that. You can do anything with that. But let's just leave it as a default value. So the learner, so here I formatted this to, you know, enter your first name here. which you can also do for this one, right? So you can say, enter your first name here. So what you want to do is create a variable. So we already have first name, so you know we're trying to create a new variable. So let's just say name variable. Always a good practice to call it what it is, right? So you can recall, or if somebody else is coming to take on the project, take over the project from you, they know what you meant. So it's good practice to call it what it is. And here you want to choose text function because it's a text string, right? So it's a string of text for the variable. It's not a number, it's not a true or false variable, it's text. And the default value is just blank. You know, it's, and then you click on OK. So use count, you have never used this. So it's, and when you hit OK, that's it. You have your, what do we call it? Name variable. So the name variable is, so, you know, this doesn't know what to do with the name variable, but this automatically adds this trigger whenever you click on inserts and inputs and data entry. It automatically adds this trigger for you, which you have to adjust. So this is the trigger we're trying to adjust here, which is talking to this text box. We're trying to say set variable. You see, this is a little different from what you would, you know, you're probably expecting to see something different like this, right? You're expecting to see a different trigger wizard when you click on, when you double click on any object inside of the trigger panel. But this is a little different, right? So this is what comes up. It's doesn't have all of those options. It's keeping you focused on what you're trying to do here, which is, you know, set that name variable to that, which, you know, if you click on OK, yeah, sorry, not this one. What did I do? That's the wrong, that was the wrong one. So we're trying to set this one, right? So you make sure you click on this and, you know, set this to name variable and then hit OK. So set name variable equals to the type value when the text entry loses focus. Now, what this means is when you click on preview and you were to enter your first name here, so you see that blinking, you see what's blinking after my name? That's just telling you the text entry is still in focus. So when you click outside, it loses focus. That's all that is. You know, so it's no longer in focus, it loses focus. So whenever the learner clicks outside, and the only reason you will click outside is to click on next, right? So when you click on next, you automatically lose focus. So that variable is set. I mean, another way to do that to kind of force the learner to, oh no.
Oh,
Sorry,
okay.
I have to plug in. Luckily, I have a charging port. Yeah, Starbucks is the best place to work. They have every charging ports. Right? Let me plug that. So what's really happening is you can add a button. So let's just say, let's just pick one random button from here, and you know, oftentimes next to that name, you would see something like submit or enter. Yeah, so it's the same. It's the same as clicking next. So that just, it's a way to make that lose focus happen, right? Because if you don't lose focus, it's still going to be, it's not going to set that variable until you lose focus. So even if this submit button isn't working, but it's a way for you to click outside of it so that that variable registers. And if you want to see a variable, like I showed you early on, if you want to see a variable in action, you click on text box and just draw a text box to, do you remember percentage sign? What's the name of our variable? Name variable.
Oh,
And you can, make that white or red so you can see better. I don't even know what's better now, but what automatically happens is it changes, but it's not, it's just telling you that that's expecting a value, right? It's not a regular text button. It's not a regular text box. What's different about it is you're calling a variable, right? You're calling a variable to be displayed when you add those two percentage signs around it. So when you preview now, you're going to see, you don't actually see that text box because it's expecting a variable. So if you click on Samuel, it hasn't lost focus, but when you click on submit, it loses focus and your name is displayed. But that's just a way for you to test that name, right? So, and once that happens, so that's telling you that name variable is always going to be Samuel. This is setting that variable to be Samuel, to be the learner's first name, so that when you go to a page like this and you do the same thing, so you call out that name once more. So you don't type Samuel here, that's not gonna work. That's not the name of your variable. The name of your variable is name variable, which is represented by Samuel, which is what you set in that first slide. Do you get it? Like if I were to preview just this 2 slides, for example, I'll tell you what, let's not do that. Let me just maybe say this shows up the new, let's create a new layer here. Let's create a new layer in this, sorry, how do you create layers? Okay, so let's just say name display, right? Let's call that a name display layer. And we can, copy the text from here, doesn't matter. So on this name display layer, let's say this is what the learner is going to see when they, so let's just say this button is going to, maybe show that layer, right? That's simple. You just show name display layer when the user clicks that. But it's also a way to, set that. So if you were to preview this, and remember we have name variable showing up, which is already going to be set. So if we didn't set this, if you didn't have a name, for example, it's not going to show anything. So if you didn't actually put in a name and you just hit submit, it's going to show that layer, but it's, that's not what we want. We haven't, oh, I misspelled it. So it's not, you see what's happening? So it's misspelled, right? Yeah, that's the good thing about, writing codes. Like if it's not correct, it's just not going to do the right thing. But when it works, it's just good to see. So name variable. Right. So when you hit the slide, And if you don't enter anything and you just hit submit, it's going to not show anything, right? But if you were to put in your name, and it's still in focus until you click on submit, then it loses focus, right? Now it shows up your name, right? And you can use that on any slide throughout your course. You can, decide to say Samuel's first year. Now, how would I bring in that variable for this one? How would I call in that variable on this slide?
Would it go before? You'd have to put that $sign name variable. Yeah.
Exactly. It's the percentage. Is it $sign or percent?
Oh, yeah.
I think it's percent. I see where you're going.
Yeah. You know what I meant.
Yeah.
My mind's on money this morning.
Yeah, exactly. So let's say name variable, right? And you don't have to worry about, oh, the text is, going into my photo. Like, it's not going to. So let's say your name variable is much longer, right? Let's say it's a lot of characters. It's only going to display whatever the learner puts in. So if it's just Sam, or if you're asking for a first name, I mean, even the longest first name is not going to be that long where it takes up all of that space, right? So you kind of just have to estimate. I mean, that's just a tip that I use. Like, it's only going to display, so it may look different for each learner depending on the length of their first name. Is that
right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Exactly. Yeah. So we're not putting in Sammy, we're putting in name variable, right?
Very good.
And maybe add a comma or a space,
right.
after it, just because it's just going to be that name, and then the ampersand, it's not an ampersand, the percentage sign, it isn't going to show up. It's just going to be that name and then the comma and that.
Right.
So yeah, that's just a quick way of displaying the learners' names, which is helpful to kind of personalize the course. In the end, you can say congratulations, Samuel. It just makes you feel like for this one, I have display that name again. So this would have said, would have shown that variable there, Samuel. This is your certificate for being a Hogwarts alumni or whatever that was. But yeah, that's the basic. That's only scratching the surface of what variables can do. I use it in almost all of my courses for different things. Maybe adding a score to a project, whether it's for example, this one is, I don't know if I used it in this one actually. So, you can have it, let's build something quickly, just as a takeaway. So let's say you were to, maybe you're building a game or something. You can actually maybe just have two boxes. So box 1 and box 2, and you can say box 1 goes to, maybe add a motion path that says box 1 goes over here, right? When the timeline starts, so, move this when the timeline starts, right? And then maybe have, okay, so let's say this was a game of, box, hits the second box. Or let's even do something simple like that. That's even a bit complicated. Let's say every time the learner clicks on this box, they get a point. Let's say that's your game, right? Every time the learner clicks on this box, they get a point. How would you go about adding variables for that? If anyone is brave enough to try.
Limit.
You want to try it?
Yeah.
Yeah, what do we have to do as far as variables to, just add a score for every time the learner clicks on that box?
Do you have to create a new variable first?
Yeah. We have to create a new variable so we could maybe, what are you going to call it?
Because you wanted to add a score, right? So maybe you can just call it score variable or something like that.
Yeah, call it exactly what it is, score variable. And what type of variable do you think we use?
Would it be a number since it's a score?
Exactly. And would it be a random number or just a value number?
If it's a game,
right.
I mean, you want it to be able to give an array of numbers, right? So
yes.
I'm stumped here. I'm not sure if that would be random, because if it's random, then it's just kind of picking any value. So maybe value.
Exactly, value. And the default could be 0, and then you hit OK.
Okay.
You hit OK again to exit. So now, you have your variable, but there's nothing on the trigger panel telling it what to do. So what you want to do now is click on that box and click on your trigger. Yeah, they already gave this one away, but what would you do?
Yeah, I was gonna say this is when you do the adjust variable.
Just variable.
Set
So
random number to
first look at your options. So you're trying to make it add a score for every time the learner clicks on the box.
Okay, so then it would be add.
Exactly. Add value.
Now, how do you know what value? Oh, okay, so
right.
I was gonna say, how do you know what value to put?
True. Yes. So it's add value 1. So you're telling it to add value 1 every time. We're going to set up when next. So when does that happen? So the action you wanted to add, so adjust the variable, add value 1 to that. What do we call this? Score variable.
Mm-hmm.
When the when what
User,
happens? User clicks.
User clicks.
Exactly. When user clicks rectangle 2. Exactly. So it's gonna happen, right? It's gonna happen. And it's happening behind the scene. I'm actually clicking on this box now. That number is going up, but what's the point in doing that? We want to display it, right? So how do you display it?
Is this when you add the percentage score variable percentage?
Exactly.
Okay.
So you go to text box and add, show where this text box isn't responding today. Yeah. So you go to text box, what do you add?
Percentage.
Exactly.
Score variable.
Score variable.
Percentage.
Exactly. So now it's telling you the default value is 0. So when you click on this slide, that's it. That's like, it's so simple. Like, so I mean, think about how you can build this into an actual game, right? So maybe you're trying to tell a learner to identify. So let's just maybe, I design games for kids a lot. So let's say animals, vector, And this could be anything. It could be a compliance course. It could be anything. I think this is cool. So just, copy. You don't even have to save it. You don't need to save photos on your computer. Storyline lets you bring it directly. Bring that in. Maybe you want the kid or whichever user to identify the lion out of this piece. All you have to do is, make that, maybe go to format shade and make that invincible, right? You know what I mean? Like, so it's there, but you want to give them a score when they correctly identify that lion, right? So
Okay.
yeah, and this is how games are built. Like if you click here, it's not gonna happen, but if you click here, you get a score. That's just, so let's say you have multiple boxes, right? This is just, adding more to the game. So you want the learner to identify the four-legged animals in this piece, right? Even though you made a copy, it's not going to automatically. So you kind of have to set that up for the second box, right? So actually, I think it's set up. So it's already set up. Yeah, like you could just preview it and, so maybe you have some instructions like identify the four-legged animals in this picture. They get a score for that. They get a score for this, right? But they don't get a score for the others, right? And you can just keep on building on that knowledge of, variables that you have. I mean, but what's one downside that could happen to this? Like, so, the downside is they could keep, just clicking and getting all points where, so you need a way to control what's happening. You need a way to control that variable. So let's say, you can decide to set it to, you can decide to edit that variable to maybe not random, but yeah, so maybe number type isn't what you want. Maybe at that point you want to change it to number, but maybe yeah, I haven't figured that one out myself. But we're out of time. Hope this was helpful. We'll definitely encourage you to explore variables a little bit more. It's all logic, just knowing how things work behind the scene and trying things out for yourself. I think will go a long way in helping you understand variables. But we'll try to set up another class just for variables. But in the meantime, this is the end of this particular workshop. Hopefully, I'll be setting up more workshops in the future. But really glad for y'all taking time out of your day to join. And yeah, I'll send out the files for this one after the class.
All right.
All right.
Sounds good. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you for taking your Saturdays, your time as well to present this. It's been very helpful.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Have a good one.
All right, you too. Bye. Bye, everybody.